If you don't have a budget, you're going to fail. Welcome, everyone, to Parking Lot Philosophy, the only show where the rain affects the audio levels. This was something I've been thinking about lately, just about, people I know in general, those who don't have budgets are the ones struggling the most right now. And I think this is kind of a touchy subject. I don't know if all schools teach this, all K through 12 schools. We had a personal finance class, which involved like budgeting, I think writing checks, some basic things like that. And then a Success 101 class, which was almost like an early business class that you'd see in a college. Just kind of teaching you a little bit about how like organizations like that function, but then also budgeting, interview skills, things like that. Things that schools arguably should teach. Now, taxes, I would argue, should be in there. We did not do taxes, though. But especially for personal finance, we did do a mock budget. And we would plan, here's what our fictitious job is. Here's the fictitious place. I mean, it's not a fictitious place. It would be a simulation. We simulate the things going on. And I learned a ton from that exercise, partially just how much you can get away with so little. One of my friends, for that class, he did his fictitious job as a line cook at a McDonald's, and I think he was a dad paying child support because he had gotten a divorce, and I remember he had, I think, a really shitty house. But anyway, point being, that class taught me a lot about how important budgets are and the fact that you can get away with a lot of things on a pretty low budget. That being said, that is if you are one singular person. And my wife and I do this. We live on $45,000, which is what my salary is. Two people. We are out of debt from college. We were able to get that paid off. We save money every single month. But I think we don't have a lot of expenses that the average person doesn't have, but chooses to have. And I think the only reason most people choose things like door dashing all the time, going further into debt, any type of betting or gambling, I think the reason choose these things is because they don't have a budget at the end of the day. Which is really like a sad occurrence. There's a lot of people that I know who could arguably have a lot, maybe not better lives, but maybe a better living situation if they were just had a budget and had things planned out and things like that. I think they would be a lot better off. But that being said, a budget can really set you up for success. The way I was thinking about it was it's the same. If you use less money than you make, you will gain wealth. And in the same way, if you eat more calories than you burn, you're going to gain fat. It's the same situation. Now, this analogy also works the same way too. If you have more to begin with, you're going to have more flexibility. So if you're like me, I weigh a lot more. I weigh like 240 pounds. I actually can eat roughly 2,000 calories and still technically be burning because I eat so much constantly, and not because I'm healthy. I am not a healthy weight for my height ratio. I am obese. But that being said, I can actually eat a lot more calories than my wife can, who's doing a calorie deficit, because she's so much smaller than me. She weighs way less than I do. And so that's one of the things. If you're starting with more, you have a lot more flexibility. And it's the same way with budgeting. If you have more money, you have more disposable income, obviously it's way easier to do these things. My wife and I are really lucky. We live in a pretty low cost area. And then we don't have a lot of, extra expenses. We've never had credit card debt, which is really good. And then it's not like I don't pay my phone bill, and I have a hugely subsidized auto insurance because I'm tied into my dad's auto insurance, but I pay it. And because he's an old ass dude who's got a bunch of years, I only have to pay like $300 a year to insure my car. So there's a lot of things. I don't have any payments on my car because we bought it outright during COVID. All these different things that make me in a very fortunate and lucky area. And again, it's kind of that same thing. I'm starting with more opportunity so I can end up, continuing to make that. So if you can budget, this whole thing has been leading up to budgeting. If you can budget, you will be successful and you will win. So many people choose to not budget. It's one of the easiest things you can do. It's like the equivalent of showing up to a class with participation. You show up and you will do well in the class. You make a budget, you will do well financially. Now, that being said, a lot of people think budgeting is really hard. It is not whatsoever. It just requires you to think a little bit, and I think that is the hard part for most people. A lot of people are used to being on their phones and scrolling. A lot of people are used to not thinking about these kind of tough, somewhat stressful things. Like finances can be really stressful. And, it is a little bit daunting at times, but you can go into like Excel or Google Sheets. They already have like monthly budget sheets made, and all you do, fill in your numbers, and it's like, okay, if you fill in these numbers, this is how much money you need to be making to actually continue these purchases. And so sometimes the question becomes, okay, well, I don't make that much. How do I spend less on groceries? How do I spend less on dining out? How do I spend less on clothing? All these different things. And then you can really find your way into living a lot better financial life. And even too, I would say so there's other arguments for budgeting. Dave Ramsey, who I'm not the biggest fan of, he has this whole thing, don't use credit cards, which I agree with to an extent, but if you're going to use them responsibly, don't go into debt, which I 100% agree with. Now, he has a lot of other things, one of which is using cash for everything because mentally you feel it more, which I think is reasonable until you start thinking about the fact that most people, when they use cash, they're not going to budget things correctly. And so then they're going to run out of money too quickly, which is part of the reason he says that. He says, in your envelope every month, you put $400 for groceries or whatever your grocery amount is. That's roughly how much my wife and I spend, about $100 a week. So you put in that much money and you're not allowed to use any more than that. And then so at the end of the month, you're out of luck if you can't, use up all the groceries that you have. I think part of it too is recognizing not to waste money too. There's so many things that like the average person wastes on money that you don't think about. Idling your car. Like right now I could have my car on for the air conditioning, for anything else. I don't do that. I don't. My wife and I don't have the heat on, or not the heat, the air conditioning on in our house, even though it's been like 85 during the days. Now, granted, once it gets up to 90, we probably will. There's a lot of different ways you can save money that you might not even be thinking about buying. Anyway, point being, there are ways to stretch your budget. The other part of budgeting that I wanted to talk about is a little bit of how you set it up. Use those forums. There's also websites that can help you budget as well. But also recognize too that stress you're feeling if you're putting it together or you're like, man, we're not meeting our budget or things like that. That stress is stress you are going to feel either way because you're behind on your bills or you don't have enough money or all these different things. So you'd rather feel that stress when you're in control of it than when you're stressing out because, your bank account's really low. And because of this, my wife and I have had, our bank account looks solid, and we don't necessarily make a ton of money. And that's one of the things you can really set yourself up for a really successful future, just by putting together one of the simplest budgets. And I will say too, my wife and I, we're not strict with our budget. We do spend things kind of frivolously once in a while, but we have that general idea of this is how much. And when we first put our budget together with my current salary, we were like, oh, wow, we will be making negative $200 a month. Clearly this does not work. but somehow we're actually gaining money. I still don't know what we're spending less on. I bet it's groceries, and I think we actually, our rent, I think we put as higher and things like this, because a lot of our budget we actually did before we moved into where we are and before we were doing the things we're doing. And so you'll find more ways. Like it does stretch a little bit further than you realize. But if you make a budget, you will be successful. If you want help making a budget, or you want more information about it, please leave. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. If you're elsewhere, go to my YouTube channel, Parking Lot Philosophy. And then that way you can ask more advice. Maybe I'll put some helpful information in the comments as well. That might help. But anyway, the rain has picked back up. So I don't know. It was going down and then it went back up and then now we're here. Anyway, have a great rest of your day and bye for now.